Hi everyone, it's Sketch Your Fashion Drawing Tutorials, and this is second part of the lesson where we are rendering this beautiful dress by Ayana Ifem. So it's quite complex dress, but mostly we will use Ice Gray 3 for black marker, and sometimes we will use lilac one. So when you see this light gray, I'm using Ice Gray 3. And when I use darker gray, it's Ice Gray 4. And I also use black. So these are 3 markers, because sometimes really I will change them very often. And it's very hard for me to comment for this skirt because I'm illustrating actual skirt. So there is a reference image that is uploaded to Patreon. So please open it on some other device and just compare what I'm doing and how I'm interpreting this skirt to illustration, because really it's not something simple as like A-shaped skirt, or there are many layers. There are like 77 meters of tulle used for this skirt, and they are not arranged in some predictable way. So right now I'm using Ice Gray 4. And I want to show, this many loops that are created by these folds. When on a small area, you have many folds created with tulle. So I'm adding Ice Gray 3. So I'm going to interchange them. But usually I will try to do it a bit faster, so I can blend them a little bit, because when markers are wet, they blend, but not as much as paints, but still. So as a base, it's good always to start from the lighter marker and then bit by bit move to dark ones to build the shadows. So here we have some. There are many wrinkles as well, because the fabric is very light and tends to wrinkle a lot. It's very, affected by environment because of its lightness. It's not as structured like thick fabrics like wool. So now you can see a little bit the outline of the folds that I drew with pencil. Very often the sides of the folds are darker and middle part is a bit lighter. Then we usually add shadows at the bottom of the folds, like inside there. Also, you see, there are many spots that I made with lighter marker, because we want to show a small, depressions on the top of the texture, because this texture is not like a car body, which is absolutely like flat and firm. It always creases. So that's what I'm showing. Now adding shadows inside, you see, inside of the fold. You can perfectly also switch off the sound and just at your own pace, just take a look at what I'm doing, compare it to the reference image, enjoy your music, because right now I don't know how could my comments be that useful, but I will try to at least explain certain things. Extra shadows inside. I'm doing it with Ice Gray 4, but when you layer markers, it becomes a bit darker. So again, more those creases. Our fabric is not perfectly smooth. Adding more and more. Build this complexity. Show it. You are not even building, you're showing the more like reality. More of Ice Gray 4, it becomes even darker. I'm trying to locate that extra layer a bit higher of those on those shapes, so like the hidden parts hidden from the light. And then I just build those lower layers. Okay. Now I'm working with ice gray 4 and going on. So here we have a lot of like a piece of wrinkled tulle that is a bit hanging down. And then here we have more structured folds on the right side, more like wavy, the ones that we might meet more often. And usually when you make this wave, inside you make it darker, because it's like a tunnel. Those are actually small tunnels too, or more like caves. Actually, try to look for these complex skirts or anything and try to draw more and more. You'll just get used to that. And then, you know, when you start drawing something simple, first of all, you will add some interesting curves, some interesting volumes, and rendering will be so much easier after doing work like this. So next tutorials, I will make them more thematic and shorter and a bit specific fabrics and maybe a bit less complex ones. But this one, I mean, once per month is not bad. And now I want to, you know, to give definition to this part with many wrinkles. Also, I'm adding shadows because we have so many overlaps that we have a lot of shadows. And our right side is darker. If you remember from the top rendering, it had more of the pigment and darker markers were used for that side. So mostly I work with ice gray 4, we could call it the main marker. And I just try to build a smooth transition from dark to light, from sides of the folds to center, from area below it further. Then we will work with white pencil and white pen. So right now we are building a nice background for that. And it's important for us not to make it, now I'm using black, not to make this background too light. Because if you use anything white on the top of light gray, it won't be visible. Now I spread black marker on plastic surface. I take ice gray 4. I just, you know, like take a little of that black, like with a brush. I dip into it ice gray 4 and also make a transition from black to gray. So we can use marker as a brush. We can mix it with some other marker. You can use plastic, you can use glass, metal, anything that is firm, that doesn't absorb marker. So I'm going lower, just drawing the other layer. You might not really follow the pencil. It depends, like sometimes it helps, sometimes I feel like I want to go some other way. So it depends on what is more convenient for you. please share your wishes about what you're interested in rendering. It can be anything. It can be some, maybe even ancient costumes, or maybe traditional ones, or some specific designers and looks. Like recently we had Chiara Ferragni, and we can render something else, maybe from some event or fashion show or a movie. So I'm very curious about what you're interested in. So more of ice gray. So whenever you see light marker, like light gray, it's ice gray 3. So just 3 markers so far. Sometimes we will add the lilac just to add, okay, a bit mixing again with black. And when you color, your markers start losing that black pigment. So it's really kind of cool way to build, to come from black to gray, just using this technique. So now ice gray 3, the light gray. And here I also want to move from black to gray, and for that I'm mixing ice gray 4 with black. The fabric looks a bit pleated in some places, so I just draw those like strokes, longer strokes, to show some pleated effect. At least it reflects the light that way. And just adding shadows where I feel that the area is lacking some contrast. And here we have some wrinkle, and shadows are really stretching down from that loop. And now I'm adding lilac. It's really nice to, if you have a highly reflective fabric, to use some other color. Maybe your dress is reflecting color of surrounding, or you can just choose, for example, the top is brown, which is orange, and the contrasting tint, according to color theory, would be something like violet and purple, which will look effectively. So it's like opposite color on the color wheel, and it looks nice as a combination. So I spread ice gray 3, and that this area became wet. So when I added black and now ice gray 4, it just a little bit blends. You can see there is a tiny effect of the paint. So ice gray 4 for a wider shadow area. And here we have the edge of the layer, and I'm adding black. I'm doing it a bit faster, so markers blend. Adding more of the black, maybe inside of these caves. Ice gray 3. Ice gray 4. Even a bit of black again, adding while the base marker is wet. Again, ice gray 3. Lilac. just making this overlay covering everything. And when it dries, it will also become a bit lighter. Plus, it will blend a bit with gray, which will desaturate it a bit. Now more of the shadows. Ice Gray 4, continue working with it. Some black. And on the sides of it, Ice Gray 4. And usually if I have some dark gray that I'm adding on the sides of black, I know that I'm going to layer that gray, especially on the sides, because black is quite different from gray, so you need several layers of gray to make a smooth gradient from black to gray. So it really doesn't look like two separate patches. Alright, so now when everything is dry, I'm starting working with pencil. I really love Prismacolor Premier pencils. That's why it's so tiny right now. I really need to buy extra pencils. What I love, they're really thick. I mean, in terms of the pigment layering, I really like, and which makes it more predictable when you work with them. So now I'm showing the top of all that folds, like you see that waves, and some huge ones, the top of it I just stretch to her waist. So yeah, adding some highlights with a white pencil too. And you can see that when I applied the white pencil, my lines are a bit curvy. They are not straight. They're a bit like as if my hand is trembling. And now those caves, I'm trying to build lines that surrounding those caves and stretching down. Actually, that's the fabric that builds those loops by folding and folding around itself. And whenever I feel that there is not enough of contrast, I add black pencil inside. And actually, when you add highlights, you can feel that the background is not dark enough in certain places. So there you can work. Sometimes if area is huge with marker, if it's small, you can fix that with a pencil. Like here, I'm adding some shadows with black pencil. And also black pencil is more opaque than black marker. So even if you have black marker somewhere, but you feel that it's not enough, you can add extra black pencil. And it looks really effective when you work on the edges of those layers, but also try not to use too predictable lines. So make them, break them sometimes. Make them in some places more curvy, in some places more like straight. You know, like fabric doesn't lay in some one way. So for that you need to show the dynamics with your unpredictable lines, dynamic lines. I hope you're enjoying this tutorial. I hope you're inspired because I think it's super long, and I don't joke, but I think you can learn many things from this, and visually it seems quite pleasing. I'm going on in the same way. Usually you can see, like, if there is like some dark line stretching, it means that there should be some fold, because when there is something dark on the fabric, it means that it's like a mountain, one side of the mountain that is not lit. So you can follow with white pencil just along the darker lines on the fabric. But of course, those dark lines also drawn by you, so you control if you want to add some crease on the fabric. And the edges as well. Actually, the original footage was like 4 hours, and I speeded it up twice, which became like 2 hours and something. And then I started cutting out every unnecessary second, so you don't, get bored, or you don't watch unnecessary like fragments. And now it's like 57 minutes. So but actually it took me like 3 days to complete the sketch. It's more like illustration, it's not sketch. Sketch is done really fast. So this one is more like fashion illustration. So now I'm again using black pencil, adding shadows, and with white pencil adding, you can also add some small creases inside too. And a bit of light blue pencil. I'm coloring on the top of that white pen, on the top of the fabric. Okay, so here I want more of the contrast, more of the shadow, so I'm using ice gray 4. And you can add even ice gray on that edges, because some of them are closer to us and they are more lit. Those that are getting to inside, they are darker, so they shouldn't be like the same white for like all along that fabric edges. You can use pencil as well to darken some fragments of that white lines. Yay, here we also have some really wrinkled pieces of tulle. more of the shadows. I'm using 08 Sakura white ink pen, and I usually use 08 for medium-sized lines. I use 10 for thicker lines, and I use 05 when I need really fine lines with white pen. I put off the gloves because here there are some things like smaller details, and it's not that comfortable to work with gloves. It's not comfortable to work in gloves in general, especially when fingers are closed, but I do it just for the aesthetic purpose. I want you to look at the image, not at my hands, and yeah, and it's just a sketcher. So some blue pencil. And by working with black and white pencil, you can get that cool effect that you're seeing on the right side, just here. That kind of feathered effect when two oil pencils are meeting each other. You can get it using those two pencils, like any colors, basically. All right, next. Here we still don't have a decent transition, so I'm using Ice Gray 4 and I'm going to work with this lower part. Shadows with black pencil. And some lilac marker. You can make the darker area not just to show shadows, but sometimes also to build the background. Like if you want to show this wrinkled tulle, it's really nice if you have some darker background with Ice Gray 4 or even a bit with black. So it will be more visible. And then you can lit it with a white pencil. In between the strokes, adding some Ice Gray 4. shadows. And since I added like extra layer here, I'm adding some shadows here too. You can try to make maybe something even unrelated to this design, like some steampunk look with this volume, what, I forgot this word, with a huge volume. Voluminous? Yeah, voluminous skirt. And try this way of rendering, because one of the patrons, Sarah, is creating cosplay costumes, and that also one of the applications of when you can draw the costume that you are creating to maybe communicate it even more effectively to your own fans as well. So now working with a white ink pen and showing all those wrinkles. Also, sometimes you can add pen and smudge it a bit if you want to show very subtle highlights. Maybe some crease below one layer of tulle. Yeah, adding, for the contrast, adding a bit of ice gray 4, a bit higher between those lines. And adding some purple and blue pencil. And black again for the shadows. Cool gray 3, just to build the base of, for the general shape. Bit of lilac. It's also quite light, so I don't worry, I am just applying. Just try to be more or less sure about the outline. If you're not sure, then draw it with a pencil, and once you're satisfied, just follow it. And now I'm working with ice gray 4 again. And start from darker area, those below that layers, and then just defining the next layers that I'm going to work with. And since here it's like a flower that doesn't have super, like organized rows of layers, but more organically distributed layers, I'm just drawing. Sometimes I draw the way that I want, just add some personal layers. And we all interpret these dresses in our own way. Like sometimes you can see fashion illustrators drawing the same dress, but they draw all those layers and shadows and everything in their own way, because we see differently and we express things differently, and it's normal. Bit of lilac. Ice gray 4. Be careful when you work next to the pencil, because I mean, I sometimes color on the top, but it's a little bit destructive for your markers. Not that crazy if you do it not often, and then you clean your marker on paper, but still, like for the nib of the marker, it's a bit damages. Using white pencil. So I used white pen on the top of that feather-like folds, and then I just spread white pencil to make that smooth highlights. Tulle wrinkles a little bit like, you know, those transparent plastic bags that they very often have in the supermarkets. Like many layers and, not layers, many wrinkles, and those wrinkles are quite, you know, like angular, straight lines. So that's why I add, especially when the piece is like stretching like down and maybe crashing against the floor, it has this angular wrinkles, and we'll see them later when we render the hemline. So that's why with a white pencil you can make like many different like strokes that are straight or angular. Not very like fluid and organic. Some blue. You can check for some tulle wedding dresses or tulle dresses. Check some other designs too. Try to draw them maybe in different colors as well. Try always to determine which color is the lightest, which one you could use a base color, like Ice Gray 3. And then which is the main color of the dress. Like maybe if some pink is going to be your base color, but red is the main color. And some burgundy or walnut is going to be shadow color. Maybe fourth one, even black, will be a super dark one. So I missed some parts because I use the same technique. So you can check the reference image if you're like really following me, and just try to complete those parts that I omitted from the video just as an exercise. Otherwise, this video is too huge. Like originally it was too huge. So here we have some area that looks like pleats. So that's why I'm adding those strokes. Now using Ice Gray 4 or Ice Gray. That was Ice Gray 3, and now I'm using Ice Gray 4. Sorry for that. Just yeah. and already showing some fabric crease. Many wrinkles. And some shadows. Coloring everything. And a bit of ice gray, like any lighter one, for certain parts. So not everything is super dark. When you render something like this, it's important to really take your time. Don't try to finish illustration in one day if it's complex. Otherwise, you risk to ruin it, because the focus and concentration, your power will decrease as you going to work with that, because it's really hard. Too many details, all these gradations of color. So when you feel like you're tired, you worked for 3 or 4 hours, just put it away and start tomorrow. Then you can be sure that, as you go look down at the skirt, you don't see like lazy fast work. Because when there are many layers and each layer must be like needs a lot of attention, it's really hard to not lose patience. Really, like sometimes I get mad. So here the layer ends. I'm adding shadows with black. Here I'm not afraid of adding black because the fabric itself is very dark. So it's okay. If it would be like a pink dress, I would never add black as a shadow. Here you can see the hemline. I had that ellipse. You see the edges, they kind of stretch upwards on the sides, because that's how you draw the hemline of the dress. It's not a straight line, it's a curve, the sides of which are looking upwards. Using Ice Gray 3 and applying it very, very, like a bit randomly, but the strokes are, looking up, because that's the way the fabric creases. It stretches, it hangs from top down because of gravity, and it crashes against the floor. Usually when you leave that uncolored spaces with highlights, they are in the shape of some triangle, because the top part is a bit wrinkled on the top where it's sewn, so it has some triangular shapes. Ice Gray 4, so now working the very similar way that I worked with Upper Pot. The black, a bit of Ice Gray 4, and black again showing like pleat-like lines. And Ice Gray 4. Also we have that edge, you can add shadows along it. Ice Gray 3. Also a good way not just to look at the images of actual fabrics, but also at the paintings, like especially like some Renaissance paintings or any like portraits where there are so many costumes, and just to look at how great artists showed the fabric and different types. So it's also a good education, good observation for you. And try to analyze very carefully and critically. Try to think about source of light, look at the pigments that they used, like what colors you can see. Like recently I've been to Van Gogh Museum, and I really was admiring the color combination that he used. And he would have like threads, actually the ones that you use for knitting, and of different colors, and he would mix them and just to pick the colors that look effectively together for his paintings, and then he used similar tints. That's really cool, I think. And yeah, and now like there are programs like Coolers. I actually have a video, if you checked it on my channel, about picking effective color combinations, and there are several apps, like free ones on the web, that you can use to choose a nice color combination. Even to choose the pencils that work well together, like purple and blue with this gray, and they give this super cold, I don't know, like dark, dramatic color. By my nails, you can see that this is definitely third or even fourth day. I lost the count for like, I don't remember if it was 3 or 4 days. You can add some, like dots or some tiny spots with pencils too. because anything could happen to fabric. And there are some tiny wrinkles too, like super small holes, like hole-like wrinkles, and you can show them. And white pen. So if we would use just gray, this dress would look like really a bit boring. So that purple and blue pencil gives this like really nice effect. Just gives it richer look. And yeah, it's just, I mean, visually, of course, it's not about the design. It's about just making it monochromatic, just not that effective. Okay, so here we have those pleats, and I give a strong effect of them using white pencil. A bit of blue and purple, like a more amethyst, lilac color. Some shadows on the side of that huge wrinkle. Not even a wrinkle, fold. Okay. And a bit of shadows with black pencil. Blue. Okay, so I colored the bottom part, and you see that kind of transparent effect at the bottom. You get it just by applying a bit light gray in the center, and you just draw with black marker or black pencil the back side. It just looks like transparent. It's not, of course. And then you apply white, purple, or any pencil on the top. So now I'm working with this super wrinkled area, and then adding white pencil on the top. So sometimes, as I said, you can smudge a bit the pen, adding some shadows. and adding a bit of blue pencil. Alright, so we are done with this tutorial. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you got some skills. If you have any questions or suggestions, please share in comment section below. And thank you very much for supporting my art and being my patrons. Have a nice day and see you in the next tutorial.